One of the things that people say over and over and over that when you're in the weeds, you don't believe. Like, hey, I can't afford to do that. That's not realistic. That's not pragmatic. One of the things they all say you should do is standardize. You should standardize. It is worth it. Our service is not only cheaper to deliver because we aren't chasing this old hardware, but also life is better. Can you imagine you hire a really talented engineer from a really formidable competitor who perhaps is bigger than you and better than you and where you want to be? He sits down, he's like, wait a minute, what? You want me to look at a Windows 2008 server on a 12-year-old piece of hardware? What does he feel like? I'm in the wrong place.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Servosity. Today, I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet. Today, I am blessed to be joined by Jon Wright. Jon went from 2 to 45 employees, and his secret weapon was becoming a vCIO for his clients far earlier than anybody thought you could. So if you think, oh, I can't do it, I can't afford to hire a vCIO, he did it himself, and that allowed him to deliver business value without selling and retain his clients virtually forever. So if you want to deliver those dream outcomes to your clients so that they rave about you, don't miss out on my conversation with Jon today. Jon, you came into this different than the normal or stereotypical, I'm an engineer and I went and started fixing computers. Tell me how and why you started your tech business.
Well, in the 11 or 12 years prior to starting my IT business, I started and ran 3 other businesses. I won't say I closed them all. They didn't all fail, but none of them were the success that I thought they were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had a seasoned journey in terms of running a business, taking risks, doing all of the entrepreneurial type stuff. But actually, I was very burnt out on it.
How come?
Well, the business that I just finished running was struggling very much because of the 2009 recession. I had a lot of employees, which, as we all know, is the hardest part of the job. And of course, none of them, I didn't feel like any of them cared about it as much as I did. I was driving an hour each way to the office, and which was fine when I was making enough money to provide for my family. But when the recession hit and we started struggling, I'm like, this job sucks. So I started really experiencing burnout. I had my oldest daughter, who is now 16 years old, my first kid. So I really understood what, love from a child looked like. I kind of had a moment where I realized that making a bunch of money was not my calling in life. And so I said, I'm going to stop, because all 3 of the businesses I'd started before this were really in pursuit of just, making a lot of money. So I said, well, I'm going to refocus this down to, and our family overhead was way, way low because this business wasn't doing well.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I actually only need a very small amount of money to support my family, and they love me no matter what I do. So I'm going to do what I love. And so there was a tiny part of these other businesses that I enjoyed the most, and it was managing the technology. I didn't know how to do that, but I managed the contractors that did it. I learned in the process, and I did some of casting the vision for what technology should do for our companies with automation and things like that. That's what I got excited about, was the technology and the automation, things like that. So I said, I'm going to open this was, 2011, and I was pretty naive. And so I said, I'm going to open a computer shop, and I'm going to open it a mile from my house. So I've solved the commute problem. I've solved the employee problem, because it was really just going to be a little 2-person computer shop. And I solved the doing what I love problem. And so I rented an office and I hired a person, which is an important part of my story, is that I recognized early on what I didn't have, and I hired it right away. And that was the tech skill, which obviously an investment that a lot of new entrepreneurs aren't able to make. But what I coach them whenever I have their ear to do two things: take the leap, make an investment if you can, even if it stretches you, but also make your prices high enough that you can afford to do that. All right. And that's one of the first mistakes a lot of us make, is pricing without thinking of what I'm going to need to buy a van or a truck. I'm going to need to hire a person, and I'm going to have to buy insurance, even if I don't think I need insurance on day one because I'm just this brand new company. You're going to have to buy it next year. And so setting your price high enough to do that. So I hired somebody, opened a little computer shop, retail. We would do, just like a lot of us started, we would do anything anyone asked us to do for $95 an hour. Some flat rate services, but mostly we had people that would ask us to do random things like fix their scrapbooking software and stuff. And I also leaned heavily into friends and family. I made sure, okay, this time I'm going to be sure and tell all my friends and family what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm doing business in the local community too, as opposed to an hour away. And every time I had an uncle, a nephew, a friend of a friend came through the front door, asked for help with something, I was always the guy who knew how to get those things done, but I sent them a bill. Mm-hmm. And I think 8 out of 10 of them expected a bill. 2 out of 10 of them were like, oh, yeah, we're doing this for money. See the rented office and the employee and all this. And the funny thing I've told people was, look, I'm going to solve this problem. Either I'm going to get paid for that time, or that person's going to know that they can't take that time from me again. So either way, I win. Mm-hmm. So we did that. We were zealous about capturing all of our time, billing for it, and obviously providing value while doing that. And it didn't take very long for the burnout to clear. Nice. Thankfully, it was so great. It was like. And you get a couple of quick wins. So we had people walk through the front door because we were right next door to a frozen yogurt shop. You would have people wandering around with their frozen yogurt. They walk right through the front door and just start asking questions, which from a productivity standpoint was kind of annoying. And I realized the perils of having a storefront that we closed, 4 years later, well, really kind of for that reason. But we met people. Mm-hmm. Oh, I actually met a couple of people who I can still trace back to 5-figure MRR contracts, 5 figures a month. Wow. And so, not that I recommend that as your business strategy, but it worked for us. We met people, everyone who walked through, even if they just needed a virus removed for their computer. They have a spouse, an uncle, somebody who works at a business who was our target. So,
John, let me jump in and ask, you shut down the other business, so you were burned out.
Yeah.
But you were burned out. So did you immediately start the other one because
Absolutely.
You had needed to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because to me, running a business, just the idea of running a business isn't hard. You know what I mean? That's refreshing in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. It's certain business activities and certain businesses that are hard. Mm-hmm.
And just for context, how many employees did you have in the prior business?
We had 90.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of people to care for.
But they were mostly call center employees. So just entry level or people on hard times or, that type of thing. So it was a very tall order to manage 90 people in that stage of their career.
And people that don't stay long in that kind of career.
Right. So we had to hire 10 people a week to have 90 employees.
I bet. Good thing that's not the case with the managed services industry, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was different about this business that made you not feel burned out as you started?
Well, immediately I wasn't responsible for 90 employees that I barely knew. So that was probably the biggest deal. The one employee I hired was somebody I knew and had a great amount of confidence in. So we're talking really one of my best friends in the real world and in the business world. So you can imagine how that would be refreshing. But I won't say I was immediately refreshed because there was anxiety around if this is even going to work.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So the real refreshment came when we had a little bit of success. When we started, having enough money to pay our bills, which was pretty quick, because overhead is pretty low. We were charging, $95 an hour 14 years ago in a low cost of living city. We could bill 15, 20 hours, and we were in pretty good shape.
Hey guys, Damien here. As I continue to interview the top MSPs in the world, one thing has become incredibly clear. It's time that we let go. Even more than that, every time I focus on my zone of genius and get out of the way and do the very few things I'm good at and delegate to others, I'm ready for that next level of growth. So if you're ready for that next level of growth, one way that I could help you is with Servosity. We co-manage your backups and disaster recovery so you can focus on what you do best, let us do the rest, and then what we do is we test the backups every single day so you never have to worry. If you'd like to learn more, click the link below. So, how did you become a managed service provider from the retail storefront next to the Froyo shop?
Well, it was several very small iterations. I think the first thing we realized was that the clientele that was coming in from a storefront and standing in front of a counter wasn't going to have a high enough value on IT services for us to be able to charge them more in the future. And we weren't going to be able to grow because we weren't going to be able to charge them more. And we were already, dealing with things like, why does this cost so much? So the first was a realization that residential was not the way to go. We had a 5-year lease though. And we realized that probably a year in. So we renovated to put our people front and center. So instead of racks of inventory and a counter that you walked up to, when we renovated so that when you walked in, you saw 8 cubicles and pretty much nothing else. So honestly, it sounds like a little thing, but it changes, I think, people's perception of what you are. Oh, you're in the people business. You're in the expertise business. We had 4 or 5 people by that time in like year 2, but we changed the mindset a little bit. And then, of course, we still didn't shed the residential work. It took us a very long time to do that. We just made absolute sure that we charged for all of it. And that pushes out the ones for whom it's not valuable. And they'll go to somebody, to their nephew or whatever, or they'll decide they don't need to figure out that thing they don't want to pay to figure out. So we just were very diligent about tracking our time and charging and sending invoices while pursuing small businesses. But we weren't a managed service provider yet because I didn't believe in the fixed fee model.
Why is that?
Well, I had, let's just say at the point that we had 10 or 15 small businesses that counted on us for IT. They called us, we started a timer, we fixed their problem, we stopped the timer, we sent them a bill, just like their accountant or their attorney.
Yeah.
Most months, they might get a bill for a couple $100, and twice a year, they might get a bill for $1,200 because they had a big problem or something, or they had a big project. And so the only value back in 2013, 2014, the only value that I could ever hear from the consultants and the pundits who were telling us we needed MRR was that it was for us. Like, you need predictable revenue. I'm like, yeah, I would like predictable revenue, but what's in it for my client? My client can afford the swings from 200 to 1,200. Like they don't need me to normalize that for them. So I just looked at it, and I'm sure you could look back and say I was misunderstanding, but that's the reality of the situation. My client didn't need me to normalize that for them, so I wasn't gonna. I was just gonna, and it also very much de-risked us because we got paid for all of our time.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, well, don't you want predictable recurring revenue? Well, back in 2014, I said, yeah, I've got predictable recurring revenue. I've got a lot of clients, 15, 20 clients. Somebody's always calling us. I was billing 6 hours a day, easy, 7, 8 hours a day. My colleagues were billing 6, 7 hours a day. That's predictable enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
So we still weren't managed services. We did start to sell things with monthly recurring revenue, like licensing, antivirus, patching, like a lot of people, I think, patching and monitoring. So we bought an RMM. We started charging people $20 a month to monitor and patch their systems. To take it to the very next step, it wasn't until probably, 5 years in, we closed the storefront, moved into a real office.
Okay.
So Class A office building, one of the nicest buildings in town, so that we could show people, that we belong in the same conversation as your lawyer and your accountant, and that's why we charge by the hour or whatever. So 2016, we're in a real office, no longer storefront. We still haven't. We're pretty much shedding the residential because they're just not comfortable, walking into an office building, taking an elevator to the second floor, walking into a receptionist instead of a computer store. So we're just kind of slowly ushering out the residential, and we're getting paid for all our time. We're getting a little bit of, we had by this point maybe 5 or 10% recurring revenue from these products that we were reselling. It wasn't until probably, around 2017, 6 years in, that I started seeing the value in proactive work, which led to the understanding, okay, so Microsoft puts out a new feature that's off by default. All Microsoft features are pretty much off by default because they work with Fortune 50 companies who have IT departments that want to pick when stuff gets deployed, right? So we started realizing, all of our clients should have MFA turned on. But how do I do that? Because none of them are paying for me to go turn on MFA. To check all the boxes, I need maybe 90 minutes to do it right, depending on how many users they have. So now I got to call this person and say, hey, Damien, we need to turn on MFA. This is what it's all about. And it's going to take 90 minutes of billable time to do it. Like, well, what is that? And what's it going to mean to my employees? Now, he and I have a 30-minute conversation about whether or not I should bill him 90 minutes to do this thing that I know he needs to do.
Yeah.
That's when the light bulb went off. It was like, and I still use this line in my sales presentations to this day. We're going to do a whole bunch of work that you don't even know you should ask us to do.
Yeah.
That's it. That's managed services, as if we were your employee. We're going to do work all day long to try and prevent a catastrophe or a disruption in your business. And we're going to, when something needs done that doesn't really need to cost you any money, it just costs me 30 minutes of time for all of my clients, I'm just going to go do it. I'm going to tell you about it. And that's when it clicked for me. So around 2017, that we started realizing that cybersecurity landscape was changing dramatically. So we had to really pay attention. The other thing was I hired a couple of really smart employees around that time who, what smart employees do when you bring them in, especially they're smarter than you at a lot of things. And they is, well, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
That's dumb. Like, what do you mean you're not checking their backups?
Right.
I'm like, well, they don't pay us to check their backups. So I had to defend these things that we weren't doing because I'd accumulated these. Probably by this point, I might have accumulated 100 or 200 clients but the biggest thing to understand was here's what I said, who do you think they think their IT person is? It's John Wright. It's core managed. there's not someone else that's checking their backups.
That's right.
It's us or no one. And so now I start looking at all these 200 clients as a liability.
Right.
I'm like, okay, they think I'm checking their backups. I'm not charging them to check their backups, so I can't do it. How do I fix that? I have to tell them all that they have to start paying us to do proactive work or go.
Mm-hmm.
And that started the managed services journey that maybe 2017-ish. And so we converted a whole lot of our clients, because a whole lot of them were already spending, $1,500 a month in time and materials. So getting them, I always pretty much told them, was like, you're going to have to spend 20 or 30% more, period, because there's a whole bunch of work we're not doing.
Yeah.
Because you're not asking us to do it. And so we started converting them, and that's how we got over to managed services.
Mm. Was that pretty easy transition, or was that fairly long and drawn out?
It was grueling. It was grueling, but worth doing for sure. Yes, it was hard in a lot of ways, but one of the ways it was hard was some of these people were paying us $300 or $400 a month for doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had, let's say 20 computers that we were charging them $20 a month for to do patching and monitoring, and we weren't even doing anything with that data, which is, embarrassing. But we weren't. Okay, so we had a bunch of alerts that we didn't act on. So some of it was hard to kind of leave that behind. It's like, okay, do I really want to be on the hook for everything they might ask me for? We also, because we really wanted to keep working with the people we were familiar with and we liked, and we had the relationship we worked so hard to cultivate, we let people come on to fully managed services that weren't good candidates. Mm. And so, of course, like we're going to squeak $1,100 a month out of them, and they're hating us for it. And so, as opposed to the new leads we were getting, once we changed our message, you can have a lead come in that wants to pay you $2,500 a month and is thrilled about it.
Yeah.
Now we have these different. It's like, I remember back when we only paid you guys $200 a month. Now we're paying you $1,100 for what? And you got these ones over here that who bought into your whole offering for $2,500 a month, and they're happy. So it was hard, but the only way I felt like we could do it and maintain the relationships that are so important to us was to do it slow. So we didn't kick a bunch of people out. We let everyone, but for a very long time, we let everyone hang around that didn't want to do it.
Mm. So one thing I'm hearing as you answer all these is, most, not everybody, but most people that started what's later becomes an MSP have that tech background. But what I'm hearing is, not only because you hired a tech day one, a technician, but because you're two, you're several employees, and maybe because you were so rooted in time and materials, it sounds like you have brought with that a different view. My point is, I can't tell you how many people are like, well, we kind of check their backups. They don't pay us. Yeah. Or they kind of do, they end up in these in-between scenarios. So it seems like you've, tried to balance the tension of, maybe we should be checking their backups. That's kind of a liability, or other things like that, or those alerts you were mentioning but I can't just go do it out of the goodness of my heart. I have actual costs here.
Yeah.
How do you think that shaped the growth or trajectory?
Well, I always looked at this from the client's side. So it was very easy for me to flip the table on some of my team and say, well, who do they say we are? We say what we are to their organization, but what do they say we are? We need to be that or fix their perception of us.
Yeah.
So that was pretty easy for me to understand, as if I was writing the checks. Like I said, I came into this feeling like one of my unique offerings to our clients was to help them use technology to further their business objectives, not just do it for fun, because that's what I had done my whole career. I also, I would say one of the reasons that I hired a tech, because the work we were doing in the first year was not above me. I hired a tech because it's always been my goal to leverage a team and to have a business that runs whether I'm there or not. And so I knew that obviously someday we were going to be 8 people. And so we had to be 2 pretty quickly and build the things like, how does somebody bill for their time? And how do I make sure they bill for their time appropriately? And so we just, started acting. We always acted a little bit bigger than we actually were. And that's why.
And about how many people do you have today?
I think we're up to 45 today.
Okay. Yeah. So that's obviously much larger than most people get there. What do you attribute to that ability to get to the scale?
Well, it sounds wild when I say it, 2 people to 45 people. But 43 people in 14 years is just 4 or 5 a year, something like that. And that's how it's been. We maybe have doubled in the last. We've doubled in the last 5 years. So maybe slightly accelerated, but it's been very slow and steady, and just doing more. Doing more of the same. But we did start to invest heavily into sales and marketing over the last 4 years also. So our 45 headcount is really only, I think, 30 people that are billing their time to timesheets. We're not doing hourly work anymore, but 30 people that are responsible for doing the work that leads to all our managed services revenue. And the other 15 people are managers, account managers, salespeople, marketing, that type of thing.
Yeah. So how did you figure out how heavily to invest? Because I think it's easy when you get on I think it's at least for me, it was easy to go, I'm not really accounting for our time. Let me get really good at that. And then once I got really good at making sure we're effective with our time, then I was perhaps I was underinvesting because I was like, this person doesn't make me more revenue. Like, why don't I delay that? Why don't I hire as many of those folks? I don't have a direct driver of revenue there. Yeah.
So for me, it was, and again, we didn't hire our first salesperson until 8 years in, which I think is healthy for a lot of businesses. I think the owner can do the sales for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my biggest motivation was this pursuit of a business that would run without me. So that meant that there was going to be admin people. And so that was how I justified the administrative non-billable people early, which were critical to our growth, as for all the reasons you could guess. We always, by the way, too, and I know addressing kind of a trend amongst our peers, we always hired people in our community to work full-time in person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, again, part of my strategy, and it helps that I'm in a slightly lower cost of living area. But I wanted, not as opposed to an offshore virtual assistant, I wanted someone in my community that knew people, that could build relationships with our clients, build relationships with our prospects, our employees. And so we always did that. It was a big leap every time we hired obviously a full-time person for a real wage. And we trusted that if you hired the right people, They'll build relationships that grow your business. So that was the admin people. When it comes to salespeople, similarly, I knew that the referral-based sales that we were doing and the owner-led sales was just not what large companies do. You don't grow to 45 people or 100 people like we want to be with those kind of bottlenecks. And so every opportunity we had, obviously, to reinvest in the business by taking those risks on people, I looked at it two ways. Whenever I hired a new role, obviously there was the possibility that this person was going to exceed my expectations and I was going to be thrilled. But the other thing I knew was going to happen was I was going to learn. And so even if this doesn't work, I'm going to know why it didn't work, and that's going to be valuable. It's also the reason that we don't outsource very many things. At our size, I understand why a 10-person MSP, might want to bring in an outsourced marketing vendor, but we don't, because we want to develop that capability in-house, even if we aren't going to be as good at it today as they would be.
Why has it always been so important to you to build a business that runs without you?
Because I have a high value, I think, on family and relationships, and I don't know, just not trading time for money for the rest of my life. So again, these were probably the big dreams that I dreamt when, 10 years before I started this business, when I was pursuing, making as much money as I could. It was so that I could not work as hard as some of my peers were working. So what really happened was because I dove into something I was passionate about, I could work 50 hours a week and it didn't even feel like it.
Yeah.
And so that, obviously, me working 50 hours a week was a catalyst to us, or 60 hours or 70 hours a week, was a catalyst to us taking off. But while I was doing it, I was building processes so that I wouldn't always have to. So now I can take 4 to 6 weeks a year off comfortably. But the other reason I do it is because I also think that that's what excellence looks like. And so I'm not trying to do things that aren't excellent. I'm trying to be a good steward of my time and talents. And so a business that relies on the owner for critical function to even exist, I think is just not a good business. And so I wouldn't be proud of running one like
that. So speaking of the processes and those sort of things, tell me about your beginnings of QBRs and, trying to climb through the, we're doing managed services. Now we're going to kind of have a review or something like that.
So, let's start with kind of what we now call the vCIO process. And I probably called it that as far back as 2015. The truth is that was my favorite part of the business, was Damien calling me and saying, I got a guy, I think he's stealing from us, and I don't know if I should monitor his computer or if I should fire him, or I don't know what's going to happen if he takes all the data and goes across the street or whatever. And so I would help him think through these from a technology and a business standpoint. It's like, well, we have seen clients that monitored these employees, and what we usually found was if they thought the employee was stealing from them, they were. You usually don't get there until this is true. And why bother monitoring them? Just fire him, because once you get all this data, you're just not going to know what to do with it. And just these conversations were just fun for me and solving high-level business challenges. So I was our only vCIO for as long as I could be. And that was actually probably held me back from doing things like sales and marketing and getting good at finance and processes, because I just love to answer the phone all day and talk to our clients about that stuff. But I probably started hearing about QBRs from vendors in the marketplace that were selling things to help you do QBRs. That's where we learn a lot of stuff. And a quarterly business review where I tell them what I think we should talk about. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
And I kind of plan ahead for that, and I kind of build a strategic roadmap. Oh yeah, that would be fun, but fun and valuable, but honestly not the part of the job I enjoyed. That's too, I'm too nimble, I guess. I want to work in the random. But I realize now I start realizing that there's a deficiency in our offering. And that happens lots of times over the last 14 years. Man, we suck at this. Oh my gosh. You mean some people are doing QBRs? Some people are building the strategic roadmap. And here I am. I'm just the business owner. I'm not even a real vCIO. I'm just answering the phone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That reminds me of back before we were managed services. We
were
reacting to their tech problems. Okay. So then I started getting anxious about the fact that I wasn't providing this service. We were growing to the point to where there was no chance I was going to ever provide that service well, which led to our first vCIO hire. Our first vCIO hire, we hired a brilliant gentleman from another MSP that had a significant impact on our trajectory as a company. Challenged us in ways that we should be challenged. He knew a lot of things. Well, he wasn't a vCIO at his previous company or at ours. He couldn't, and he enjoyed doing a certain set of things that really weren't my vision for vCIO. So while we had hired him and called him a vCIO, what he really kind of morphed into was a super talented tier 3 who was also good at doing the things that I was good at. So like when you answering the phone from a client, talking to a CEO about a very high level problem and solving it. People loved him. Our business grew. Like I said, there's really nothing wrong with this guy, but he wasn't the guy to build our vCIO process. Still so, here we are. And he actually was only with us like 3 years. So 2017 and 2020, we still don't have one. 2020, we still don't have a vCIO process. We do have a couple, me and him and another guy even, who are providing pretty good strategic advisory services, but no process. So, again, this is all fueled by my anxiety and my desire to be excellent. Like a lot of us do, we look at what our peers, and of course our peers who are on Reddit and everywhere else, they all tell us how awesome they are. So we assume they're telling the truth. And it's like, okay, we still don't have a vCIO process. And so in 2021, when this one gentleman left, and then the other guy, so I immediately promoted this other guy, called him vCIO. He got poached. This was in the Great Resignation of 2021. We lost 6 of our 19 people.
Wow.
Which is another interesting part of our story that takes a whole nother pivot. So I promoted this guy, gave him the title. Some other MSP in town decided they wanted that too. They poached him. So, okay. Wow. I had to build it. I realized I probably was going to have to build the process myself, not do the work, but build the process, because that's one of the things I was strong in. And I went and I hired basically a tech with good people skills, who's still with me. And he was our first, what I would call our first vCIO. Because you heard me talk about the other 2 guys who were really they weren't running a process. They were given a title so that people would maybe listen to them. But so when I brought this gentleman on, I built a process, and one of the things that the cornerstone of this process was going to be the QBR. We had already actually started calling it TBR, because in the year or 2 before this, we did aspire to do QBRs. We never got them done. It was embarrassing to sit down with the client for the first time in 18 months and say, welcome to your QBR. So we changed the name to Technical Business Review. We still call it that to this day, even though we do them like clockwork every 3 months.
I love that. I can relate to that.
Yeah. So the cornerstone was the TBR, and it was going to be done every 3 months. So by this time in 2021, we were already good at working on tickets. I mean, great. If you're really bought into, if it's not the PSA, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you really buy into that, you really track all your time, then you have this perfect accountability of knowing that tickets get worked.
Mm-hmm.
Period. I could create a ticket, put it in our PSA. I didn't have to assign anyone. I could walk away and know 6 months from now when it comes back up, I wonder if that ever got done. Yeah, it got done because I created a ticket. So that was the environment we lived in. I said, well, we're going to create tickets for TBRs. This is easy. Every single client is going to have a ticket template that generates a ticket every 3 months that says technical business review. And then we used our PSA, which is ConnectWise Managed, to build workflow rules to send emails when that ticket existed. So ticket gets created, 15 minutes later, email goes out to the client. It says it's time to schedule your technical business review. And there's 2 paragraphs about why these are important and why they're valuable. And there's a booking link for their vCIO.
Mm-hmm.
And the direct dial, the DID of their vCIO, I managed to send the email as if it was from him. And that would result in the client scheduling a meeting with the vCIO. And now I'm trusting, now the process is going to happen. People don't normally abandon meetings on their calendar.
Right.
So that was the first step, making sure that every 3 months the client was invited. Then, of course, we started realizing that they're not going to, a portion of them are not going to book.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to get a TBR. And so I immediately planned for that. After 7 days, I think, a workflow rule would send them another email that said, you need to do this. And then after 7 more days, a workflow rule would change the status to needs absentee TBR. And so now the vCIO, I built a process for the vCIO to deliver the same value they would have otherwise delivered in a video. And so they would record a video walking through the reports and our agenda and things like that. And then they would send them a link to the video. So this wasn't as much for the client to feel the value as it was for me to make absolute sure, because I had made this mistake already with the first 2 people that tried vCIO, to make absolute sure that our vCIOs were going to know this was their job, 100%. There is nothing, you cannot not do TBRs,
Mm-hmm.
period. So you're going to get a ticket. The status is going to sit on needs absentee TBR until you change it. We work tickets, so you're going to be asked, why is this ticket still open, and blah, 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 blah. And of course, I've built all these kind of ancillary processes for how they documented it, what their agenda should look like, and things like that. So critical to your question was the automation around the tickets. Now, we have since relaxed the requirement to record a video, because even those weren't getting watched a lot of times. So now our vCIOs are allowed to put the contents of the agenda and the strategic plan into an email.
Tell me about, you developed a pretty exhaustive checklist for the vCIO.
Yeah. So,
because I'm also thinking a couple of practical things. First of all, if I'm the vCIO, I hope they didn't book for tomorrow or 2 hours from now, right? There's probably some preparatory work, and how much of that is manual versus what do I pull together?
Yep. So of course, we probably learned the hard way, the things you're talking about. It's like, oh, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, we haven't actually done the thing that we promised to do 3 months ago.
Yeah, when I take a look at it, it turns out we haven't patched the thing or whatever.
Now they're going to want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, so now I've got the vCIO looking back at me. He's like, what the heck, John? I was like, you sent me into this meeting and you all didn't do your work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. we have to build a process that makes sure we've done all the work 2 weeks before the TBR. So it was pretty simple. We have a different template that fires 2 weeks before the TBR one fires, and it's called the pre-TBR checklist. And we run through 30 or 35 things. Is MFA on? And these evolve over time. We don't actually check every 3 months now if MFA is on, because it's on for everyone, and because we have other ways to alert us when it's not. But 6 years ago, it said, is MFA on? Are they using conditional access policies? Have we made sure that the battery backup talks to the server to safely shut it down in the case of a power outage when the battery's low? Are the things that had burned us at some point in time, they went on the checklist. Yeah. Okay, from now on, we're going to make sure that every single client has their VMs set to auto start on power or whatever. So we built that checklist so that our vCIOs could walk into every TBR fully confident that hopefully we're not going to be in the weeds talking about service issues and catastrophes and things like that. So we're very proud of that process, and it's actually a process that I refer to a lot when I'm selling as unique, because the one thing I definitely learned in taking over clients from other MSPs, and I realized we only take clients from MSPs that lost their client. So obviously we're not dealing with the best of the best MSPs usually, but they weren't doing proactive work. It's really a stain on our industry. Some of them are collecting a fixed fee, and they're just putting it in the bank and hoping nothing happens, and promising that they will jump into action if something happens, but they're doing nothing to prevent it. And so that I'm pretty proud of everything we're doing to prevent those.
Yeah. And having a vCIO, what I love about the story is, because I could see me doing the exact same thing, is scheduling the vCIO and then realizing our house is not in complete order like we thought it was. Because the reality is, as you grow, the level of complexity, not only in tools and systems, but the number of people, the number of processes, right? It's just easy to think you always do this one, whatever it is, conditional access policy or MFA or certain firewall policy or whatever. Or you always check a backup or whatever it is. And then you look and you're like, oh, well, we haven't done that. So I love the candor in that story. Anybody that can't relate to that probably hasn't hired too many people in their MSP yet. Tell me about the conversation where, not everybody engages. You said something like to your vCIOs, maybe you're not providing enough.
Yeah. I still hear it a lot. And it's not always, every time I hear about a problem in our business, I always turn it back on us first. I'm sure my team gets very annoyed by that because they'll tell me about a problem that the client's causing.
Yeah.
And they're right, or to some extent. But all we can control is us. So I'm like, well, that wouldn't happen if we didn't do fill in the blank, or if we did do fill in the blank. So one of the early things I heard was, and I still hear, is they don't return my calls. No, they don't take the meeting. It's like, okay, well, we're obviously not providing enough value. That's why they're not taking your call. We've never done what a lot of MSPs did, which was use the TBR to sell things. And part of it was our business model was that when you became our client, you bought everything we were selling on day one, which the pundits and the consultants don't like too much because they like to, ascend and grow the monthly recurring revenue. But especially back then, we didn't want any clients that weren't on our advanced cybersecurity package. So you couldn't come on unless you bought it. And so there was no advanced cybersecurity to sell them later. So we weren't using our TBRs to try and sell them stuff. But maybe they came from another MSP who was. And so they don't want to talk. They don't see a value in this person because at their last MSP, that person was a salesperson trying to buy stuff. So I always turn it back on us and say, are you providing enough value? The truth is that's still only going to get you to 90% adoption on people taking your call or whatever. And so we've started letting people not do TBRs, basically. And it lowers our cost structure. Those are almost always small clients anyway, that we can barely afford to provide good vCIO services to. So we just kind of, take it. Now I make sure the rhythm is still there, that every 3 months we're doing the pre-TBR checklist. There's communication from the vCIO to this unengaged client. But for really small clients, this lack of engagement, if you're really doing if you're doing a lot of one-way communication from you to them, which you still have to do, they're not, in my experience, they are not a danger to leave just because they're not, doing that. Some of them are just happy.
So part of the vCIO team, but a whole bunch of other things, I think you said you built out a strategic advisory team. And what I'd love for you to talk about is you're making a significant investment. I think you were saying 12, maybe even 15% of your MRR.
Yeah. Yeah, we're spending, and the last time I calculated, it was 12% of our MRR on this team. And I think it's edged up because as we are trying to grow into other markets, we have expanded the capacity without, just like every time you hire somebody, they're not fully utilized. And so
right.
your whole company becomes a little more expensive on a per hour basis. But 12 to 15% on this team. It is a big investment. It does hard is because we're not selling anything. It is hard to justify that.
Right. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I get you do the right thing for them, right? But there's so many people that see a vCIO as an upsell path.
So it probably should, in time, become an upsell path for us, meaning we should evolve into offering some other things that not everybody should buy. One of the things recently is compliance services.
Mm-hmm.
We only have 5 or 10% of our existing clients that really are a good candidate to align to NIST and to pay someone, a vCISO, to align them to NIST, for example. Mm-hmm. We will evolve into there is kind of some things to sell them, but one of the things, remember, I was doing this work 7 years ago, and I can't do it anymore. So I didn't have a choice. We either had to lower the quality of our offering or hire these people. And I refused to lower the quality of our offering. I, in fact, elevated it. This team is now providing better service than I ever was. And so I want to be proud of what we're offering. So I had to do it. And once you're there, and I've done this over the years with various strategies that cost me money. Once you're there, then you have to figure out how to pay for it. And that always means charging more, raising prices and bringing people in the door at a higher price. So what that led me to do was talk about it in the sales process. Had to be sure that our clients saw that we were different, that we were making that investment. That's why we're more. And make sure that now that did cause us to lose deals.
Yeah.
Sure. But made sure that the ones that came in knew they were coming in for a higher level of service that costs a little more because we have a great strategic advisory program. And the ones that didn't come in, then maybe a few of them came back 2 or 3 years later and, like, well, you realize that you told us we were high 3 years ago and now you see why. And we don't have a gold, silver, bronze, so we don't let you come in without strategic advisory services. So I guess to answer your question, I had to do it to keep the bar high. Then I had to pay for it. And now it's just part of our offering. Now, when you talk about what this team now is responsible for, since they're not responsible for upsells, they are responsible for retention, obviously. They are the relationship generally that is going to have us get the contract renewal or get fired. It's no longer me. There is somebody that has a relationship like that. Secondly, they manage the life cycle very tightly of the client's hardware. So we sell a lot of hardware as part of our TBR process. A lot of hardware, $1 million a year perhaps, in hardware that we're making 15 or 20% margin on. So probably 20% on average. More margin on, say, networking gear than on laptops, but average is probably 20%. And so we do have money coming to the bottom line from those activities. That's just proper lifecycle management. Well, what else does that mean? All of our clients' equipment is 5 years old or less.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge difference.
Yeah. So now we have gone, our service is not only cheaper to deliver because we aren't chasing this old hardware, but also life is better.
Mm-hmm.
When life is better, can you imagine you hire a really talented engineer from a really formidable competitor who perhaps is bigger than you and better than you and where you want to be, and I've got this great engineer. He sits down and he's like, wait a minute, what? You want me to look at a Windows 2008 server on a 12-year-old piece of hardware? It's like, what does he feel like? I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked last time about a snowball effect. All of these things snowballed to where now, okay, we have a great TBR process. We've got great hardware lifecycle management. We've got low chaos. Now that we have low chaos, we have a team that's happy. And this team that's happy makes them do better work, and they stay longer, and they are evangelists for our service in the community, and they're proud of it. And so all of this, you could say, stemmed out of us making that 12 to 15% investment in the vCIO team.
Yeah, you went where I had a question, because there's always this pragmatic question of, I want to standardize. We always want to use the same vendor for the switch or the firewall, and the same, whatever else it is. But and with software, you can do that, right? But with hardware, generally when you sign the contract, unless you're exceptional, you don't throw out 100% of their equipment and roll out your preferred brand, so that you end up with some part of the time where you're dealing with multiple network vendors or access points or whatever those are. And so if I understand you right, that part of the vCIO's role is perhaps not only lifecycle management, but is some of that kind of aligning to the standard?
It is. And I will say, I learned a lot over the years by listening to the pundits and the experts. And like I joked about earlier, they're all, experts, even when they're not. But I still, one of the things that people say over and over and over, that when you're in the weeds, you don't believe. I can't afford to do that. That's not realistic. That's not pragmatic. One of the things they all say you should do is standardize. You should standardize. It is worth it. Yes, we inherit things that aren't part of our standard. We will throw the firewall out and put our own in there.
Is that day one?
Day one. The firewall is kind of the first non-negotiable.
Okay.
Now we one of the reasons we can get away with this is we don't do co-managed very often. Our average size client's 40 users. Okay. We found, we want to get better at co-managed, and that's probably a whole different offering, but we're not there. And so no one cares. No CEO or CFO cares what firewall's at the edge of the network. If they're connecting to a VPN, they have a little bit of visibility into what their firewall is. Like, yeah, I use Cisco AnyConnect or whatever. But for the most part, they just don't care. And so, the actual cost of the firewall that I provide, when you amortize it properly, and we have a shelf full of them, is $60 a month.
You're amortizing it. You're not hanging on with some big upfront piece.
There are some opportunities where we will charge them up front. if the conversation kind of goes right, yeah, you need to buy another firewall. Yours was obviously 7 years old, whatever. But if I see at all that there's going to be any friction in the sales process because they have a firewall that they just bought 1 year ago, then I don't even talk about it.
Yeah.
And then in our kickoff meeting, where I knowledge transfer from sales to project management, I say, oh, by the way, they got a 1-year-old Meraki. You have the budget to replace it whenever you want. Meaning the first time it gives you any kind of problem or it's due for a license renewal, just give them a FortiGate 60F or whatever that's on the shelf that possibly has already been paid for because it's actually 3 years old. Or we have to, because we're growing, we actually do have to buy those out of pocket a lot. Now, Tech Data, Cinex, Fortinet, they will lease them to you. And so if you don't have the cash, you can just pay $60 a month for it. $60 a month for 3 years or whatever. So the firewall is kind of non-negotiable. We do pretty much throw it out right away. I want all of our tier ones to be very proficient in managing the firewall. And I can't do that if there's 4 or 5 different ones.
Yep, that's right.
Switches and access points, they are so cheap that it is often that we get the opportunity to just include it or immediately refresh it. But they also don't give us problems, right? Our lack of familiarity with an HP switch is not a problem. Our lack of familiarity with ruckus access points is generally not a problem. And so it's not a high priority for us. But the other thing is most of the clients that are firing their MSP, and we really like to take clients from other MSPs. I really don't like in 2025 to be educating people about why they should be doing a fixed fee. But
yeah.
So if they're leaving their MSP, they probably hate everything that their MSP suggested.
Yeah.
And if you don't lie to them and tell them that their 1-year-old Meraki is a piece of crap. I'm very honest, and I say, look, the reason we standardize things is because you want your IT provider to be expert in these things. So these things are all about the same. There's really nothing wrong. If we would have picked Meraki to standardize on 10 years ago, and then sometimes they say, well, how often do you evaluate that? Pretty often. But the truth is we're not going to throw away 200 FortiGates and start over, probably. So they don't like it anyway. And maybe their MSP was underserving them, and it's 6 years old. Oh, hey, I noticed your firewall's 6 years old. I can't believe you guys weren't talking about that in your QBRs. Oh, well, we didn't do QBRs. Oh, well, it's a good thing you're with us. Well, do you have the budget to replace that 6-year-old firewall today, or should I put it on your 3-year roadmap and we should plan for it later, blah, blah, blah. So they're already changing things. We just asked them for $100,000 contract over 3 years. It should be very easy to get them to swap out a firewall if you want. So that takes us, and obviously all the software, like you allude to, gets immediately removed, and ours goes in there. But the last thing is the server, and especially the virtualization platform. So we standardize on Hyper-V. If we inherit something on some other hypervisor, we don't get to really get rid of it until the hardware is 5 years old. So that's usually not very long from now. Yeah,
you don't inherit them when it's 1 year old usually.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And so tell me about, you mentioned something of you're about 19 people and you lost 6 in a year. Wow. That had to be a painful experience.
That was a pivotal year. It was painful, especially because relationships are so important to us. So those were people that we were fond of.
Yeah.
And here in Indianapolis, and like in most parts of the country, there was big money flying around, and from Fortune 100 companies. And so the first thing I had to do was understand that I was happy for them. So, they may have gotten a 50 or a 100% pay increase.
Yeah.
And the second thing I had to realize was, okay, we are now relevant. in the community as an employer. So I felt like that was a feather in our cap. We were getting our employees poached because they worked for us. It's like, oh, that's great. Maybe we should lean into that. Lean into the fact that this is a place where you can come to grow. We hope.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive to say that.
Yeah. We hope you'll stay. But we promise you that if you come, you will be better off for it, whether you stay or go. And so we realized that we needed to lean into that. We couldn't do that immediately. It's a long process, but we realized we needed to lean into that. And the third thing was, it told me, okay, Jon, this is your chance to prove your whole business thesis. Do or die. You've been telling prospects for years they shouldn't hire an internal IT person. Because what if that person leaves? They take all their institutional knowledge. They don't know anything. This is chaos. You got to go hire one, train one, develop one. And guess what? That person on average in the IT community is going to leave again in 2 years. Don't do that. Hire core managed. We will standardize everything. We will keep great documentation. And if we lose somebody, you're going to be fine. Because we have all this systemized or whatever. It's like, that's what I've been promising people. Now's my chance to prove it. And so that turned, what was a very hard, challenging time and an emotional time even, into an opportunity for us to kind of get better and prove we were better. And that's what we did. We focused a lot on just being a better employer. So for us, that didn't mean ping pong tables and beer taps. It did mean, snacks, free lunch on Fridays. It meant just changing the narrative a little bit to acknowledge that, they have a choice. They have choices. They could leave, asking them what's important to them, doing employee reviews, systemizing that. So the Great Resignation caused us to pursue getting better as an employer. I think around that time, possibly better benefits, a 401k with company match, things like that. And it also caused us to lean into remote work and start hiring our first remote only out-of-state employees. So.
Interesting. Is that still the exception, or is it?
It is. We very much value in-person collaboration. We want everybody who is tier one to be in the office, near each other, near their managers, learning, growing. They are usually very early in their career. They might not even have a great home office.
Yeah.
But we don't give them a choice that they're going to come into the office. When you make it to tier two, you're more of a hybrid. You can go where you want to go. And then tier three is fully remote. So we're fully, our tier threes are scattered across the country because we want them very focused on solving our hardest problems, but also enables us to recruit from a much bigger pool. I just posted a senior role a couple weeks ago and got 550 resumes in 11 days. And we have a pretty hard process where you can't even really submit your resume if you're not a real person who knows who we are. And similarly, if I post that role locally, I'll get 10 resumes a day.
Yeah. Gigantic difference. I love that you've thought through that the talent pool is bigger, but you haven't just said, let's just abandon everything, close the office and go remote for tier one and where it makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to switch things up on you, Jon. What's the biggest lesson you've learned in all your years in business?
I've learned so many. I have to maybe give you two.
Okay.
First one was, and this was more relevant early on, and the second one I'm going to give you was more relevant later. Early on, it was that you had to, as early as possible, have your prices high enough to sustain the quality of work that you wanted to do, not that you were already doing. So if you look at your formidable competitor that you want to be, you obviously need to be aspiring to be as good as they are at providing service, and you won't get there unless you're charging what they're charging. So my biggest lesson was that you needed money, and then there were very few really business problems that couldn't be solved with money.
Yeah.
And usually that meant capacity to hire people. Because if you were swimming in work and your clients were unhappy, that's a problem that can be solved with money. If you have a retention problem on your team, that's a problem that can be solved with money. Now, it's expensive to solve with money. It's better to solve it with culture.
Yeah.
But the truth is, whenever I see employers complaining about not being able to find help, I said, no, you just can't find help that will work there for what you're paying.
Yeah.
Because we have people who dig ditches and empty trash cans in the world, and it wasn't because they love it.
Right.
So that's the first one. It was about making sure there's enough money to do the work that you want to do. Second one is about the importance of your team and how your team is going to, building a team that doesn't just, my first 15 employees were super loyal, and they did whatever I asked them to do because they were loyal. My next 15 employees started shifting to, these are people who can make decisions that I would probably make 85% of the time. And people who would bring ideas that I never would have thought of because they know the vision. And so, that's how you go from 15 people to 100 people, is by building a team like that and building them up in such a way that they aren't just, field generals. They are actually making big decisions. Now, just like we talked about with the vCIO team, that's an expensive proposition because you are now going to be hiring people that don't do billable work. And you're going to be trying to invest in them in such a way that they get better and do what you would do if you could duplicate yourself 4 times. But it's a force multiplier.
What's one thing, if you could go back and do differently, do over, what is that?
The one thing I would do is I would do this way sooner. I really wish I got into this business in the year 2000. I don't know, those of you that were in it, I envy you. Small business server, it seems like a pretty amazing, I hardly got to work with it, but it seems like an amazing piece of technology that could do so much. You sold a ton of hardware. You moved people off of, ad hoc file to, collaborating around files that are hosted on their server. And I just think it would have been a really fun time, 2001, 2000s. So I would have gotten into this sooner. Of course, we'd be better off just from having probably, although there were some advantages to us being born late. So that's the main thing I would do differently. And then, of course, the other thing I would do differently is just move away from time and materials sooner.
Sure.
Easy one.
Yeah, easy to see in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
What's something, given all that's going on in your business, in the world, et cetera, that you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to seeing our team grow, not in size, but in capability, and seeing them hit their goals and start to realize some of their dreams. So, for example, we run EOS, and we set a 10-year goal 3 years ago. So we're 7 years away from our big, hairy, audacious goal. which is to be a $25 billion company with 25% net profit, with a CEO that is not Jon. And Jon would just be a shareholder of some denomination. And one of the things we did culturally, sorry, it's a long answer to your question. One of the things we did culturally was we made sure that everybody in the organization always knew what we were doing as a leadership team, what our plans were. So we meet quarterly for a quarterly business review, the whole team, and we recite and we talk about our core values, our mission statement, and our 10-year plan. So our whole company hears over and over and over and over, Jon's not going to be here in 2032. He's not going to be part of the day-to-day of the operation. And so, for one, that takes away their fear that we're going to sell the company tomorrow, which is what all of our peers are doing. We're not doing that. We have a goal, and it ends in 2032, and I hope it ends with our employees owning the company or some combination of that. But at least we know that Jon's plan isn't to head to the Caymans in 2027.
Right.
It's 2032. And but I think that gets them all understanding, honestly, that the CEO job is up for grabs.
Yeah.
How many organizations can you say that about?
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that there's not just we don't have any VPs. We don't have any chief financial officer. There's a lot of opportunity over the next 7 years. So what I'm most excited about is and I'm on the edge of my seat because I can't tell you how it's going to play out, but it's like watching a movie. It's who's going to do it, who's going to really stretch themselves and grow, and I'm have their dreams fulfilled. So
I've spent so much time talking about practical process vCIO things. They're super valuable, but I think it's amazing because in so many of our conversations, it's how you want to see your people grow. So I think the other things are the higher level, and that it seems like the foundational beliefs you seem to have are how do I help my people get opportunities that they didn't have before?
Yep.
What's your biggest challenge currently?
It ebbs and flows over the years, but currently it's back to keeping up with demand and growing and staffing. So, I would say in the past 3 months, we've hired 8 people and lost 4. It's not the ratio we want to do this at.
Yeah.
So probably, and it's possible, now with 45 people, I'm starting to see people walk by my office and not know their name. And now that usually is because they're in their first week or 2. Yeah. If they're here in my office, we're going to meet at the coffee pot. I'm going to learn their name and that type of thing. But it's possible that that is contributing to an uptick in attrition. So I would say our biggest challenge is going to be heading that off.
Yeah. Interesting. What's the one book you'd recommend everybody should read?
Traction.
Okay.
Which is, I think, Gino Wickman. It's about EOS. Of course, that's a pretty easy one, I'd say.
Yeah. Is there any other that you?
I've got 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Okay. That's your kind of fan.
Yeah. We learned a lot from that, and it jives with what we're talking about with kind of, our team, what we're trying to build. I know a lot of people in the MSP community enjoyed Pumpkin Plan. This is Pumpkin Plan for MSPs by Dave Cava and Sean Walsh, who are good friends of mine. I was not a big Pumpkin Plan person because, honestly, a few things in the world that I was born understanding. It was the principles in that book. And so it wasn't a lot for me to learn there. But when I did buy their spin on it, because I knew they had great stories.
Yeah, for sure. For everybody that's listening, would love to reach out, connect with you, find out more. What's the best way for them to find you online, Jon?
My email is best. Our website's coremanaged.com, and my email is jwright@coremanaged.com.
Don't miss that opportunity to reach out to Jon. Jon, this has been an incredible gift. Thank you for your time and expertise, and it's been such a blessing for you to be on MSP Mindset.
Happy to do it. Thanks, Damien.